Cole was not a hero. He was just a man who needed money. He had signed up for the security contract because it paid 3 times what any job on Earth offered. The work was simple enough. Guard the diplomatic convoy. Stand where they told him to stand. Look dangerous. Do not speak unless spoken to. Do not touch anything. Do not embarrass humanity in front of the ancient and powerful alien species that saw humans as little more than clever animals. They were beautiful in a way that made humans feel small. Their skin glowed with soft light that shifted colors with their emotions. They stood 8 feet tall and moved like water flowing downhill. They had existed for 1,000,000 years and had built empires across 1,000 star systems. They communicated through harmonic frequencies that human ears could barely detect, though they had learned to speak aloud for the benefit of lesser species. Was one of 12 humans assigned to the convoy. They did not need human guards. They had their own warriors who could kill with a thought. But galactic law required diplomatic missions to include representatives from multiple species, and humans were cheap and eager to please. So stood at his post and tried not to feel like a decoration. Princess noticed him on the 3rd day. She was the youngest daughter of the High Matriarch, 7th in line for the throne, and bored out of her mind. The diplomatic mission was supposed to teach her patience and politics. Instead, it taught her that most species were either terrified of or desperately trying to impress them. The humans were different. They laughed with each other when they thought no one was watching. They complained about the food and made jokes about their commanders. They played games with small cards during their rest periods and argued about sports teams that existed on a planet millions of light years away. And this one human, the tall one with the scar on his jaw, never looked away when she passed him. Was used to lesser beings dropping their gaze. It was proper. It was expected. But Cole simply nodded at her like she was anyone else and went back to watching the corridor. It was rude. It was improper. She found herself thinking about it for hours. On the 5th day, she approached him during his shift. "Human," she said, "why do you not show proper respect?" Looked at her. His eyes were brown, plain and ordinary compared to the swirling galaxies in eyes. "I mean no offense, Princess. I just don't really know how to bow properly, and I figured a bad bow would be worse than no bow at all." This was a lie. He had been trained in proper protocols. But something about the way this young princess stared at him made him want to see what she would do. Studied him. "You are not afraid of me." "Should I be? My guards could kill you before you took a single breath." Shrugged, "Probably. But you would have to order them to do it, and you do not seem like the type who kills people for being a little rude." Felt something strange. It took her a moment to recognize it as amusement. She had not been amused in a very long time. "You are bold for a primitive," she said. "And you are curious for a princess," he replied. "You have been watching us, the humans. I see you in the observation gallery when you think no one is looking." His glow shifted to a color that meant embarrassment in her culture. No one had ever spoken to her this way. No one had ever dared. "I am studying your species," she said stiffly. "It is educational." Sure almost smiled. Educational. Over the next week, found excuses to walk past his post. She asked him questions about Earth, about human customs, about why his people insisted on eating dead animals and wearing the skins of other creatures. Answered honestly, without the careful political language that everyone else used around her. He told her about growing up poor in a city called Detroit. He told her about his mother who had worked 2 jobs and still found time to sing him to sleep. He told her about joining the military because it was the only way to pay for his sister's medical treatment, and about taking this contract because the money would finally pay off his family's debts. "You sold yourself into service for your family," said one evening. "That is not what I expected from humans." "What did you expect?" "Selfishness, greed, the desire to take whatever you can before you die." She paused. "Your lives are so short. I assumed you would spend them grabbing for yourselves. Laughed. It was a warm sound, rough and genuine. Some of us do, but most of us spend our short lives trying to make things a little better for the people we love. That is kind of the whole point. When the convoy stopped at Orbital Station 4 for refueling, made a request that shocked her attendants. She wanted to visit the human quarter of the station. She wanted Cole to guide her. Her advisors protested. The human quarter was dirty, dangerous, and beneath her dignity. But was a princess, and she had learned that sometimes being royal meant doing exactly what you wanted. The human quarter was everything her advisors had warned about. It was cramped and noisy and smelled like cooking oil and recycled air. The humans there lived in tiny rooms and worked long shifts and had almost nothing. But they were alive in a way that had never seen. Children ran through the corridors playing a game that involved kicking a ball made of wrapped cloth. A woman hung laundry outside her door while singing a song that made no sense. An old man sat in a corner telling stories to anyone who would listen, laughing at his own jokes. "You have nothing," said quietly, "yet you act like you have everything. Watch the children play. We have each other, that is usually enough." Looked at him. In the dim light of the human quarter, his plain brown eyes seemed to hold something she could not name, something warm and stubborn and completely unafraid. "I think," she said slowly, "that my people have judged yours too quickly." Smiled. "Give us time. We grow on people." That night everything changed. The alarms began screaming at exactly midnight station time. The lights turned red. The doors began to lock down. And somewhere in the darkness, assassins were hunting for a princess. There were a species that had forgotten how to feel anything except hate. Long ago, the Empire had destroyed there in a war that most of the galaxy had forgotten. They had not forgotten. They had become shadows, assassins, a death cult devoted to one purpose, making the suffer. Tonight they had come for Princess. Was in his quarters when the attack began. He was off duty, sitting on his bunk and thinking about the way the princess had looked at the human children playing in the corridor. Something had shifted in her eyes. Something had opened. Then the alarm screamed, and stopped thinking about anything except survival. Protocol said he should report to the main security hub. Protocol said he should wait for orders, join his unit, follow the chain of command. But Protocol had been written by people who had never heard a princess laugh for the first time in her life. Grabbed his rifle and ran toward the royal quarters. The station was chaos. Emergency lights painted everything in bloody red. People ran in every direction, screaming, pushing, falling over each other. Somewhere in the distance, heard the sharp crack of weapons fire. He moved fast, keeping to the walls, using the confusion as cover. His training took over. Check corners. Watch for movement. Keep the weapon ready but not raised. Do not shoot until you are certain of your target. He found the first guard dead outside the princess's quarters. The body was still glowing faintly, silver blood pooling beneath it. Whatever had killed it had been fast and silent. Stepped over the body and kept moving. The second and third guards were in the corridor beyond. They had died fighting. Their weapons were still in their hands, and two dark shapes lay crumpled nearby. Assassins, wrapped in shadowcloth that made them nearly invisible. They had taken 3 of the deadliest warriors in the galaxy with them. But they had not taken the princess. Followed the trail of bodies and blood into the maintenance section of the station. This was the part that visitors never saw, the part where the machines and pipes and wiring kept everything running. It was a maze of narrow passages and sudden drops, lit only by emergency strips on the floor. He found in a junction room, backed into a corner, her light flickering with terror. 2 stood before her. They moved like oil sliding across water, their weapons humming with energy that could cook a brain inside its skull. They were taking their time. They wanted her to be afraid before she died. Did not announce himself. He did not demand surrender. He raised his rifle and fired. The first assassin dropped before it knew it was in danger. The second spun, faster than anything had ever seen, and the neural disruptor beam missed his head by inches. He felt the heat of it pass his cheek as he fired again, and the second assassin fell. Stared at him. Her glow was the color of shock. "Commander Cole." "We need to move," checked his ammunition. He had used 8 rounds. He had 42 left. It would have to be enough. "Can you run?" Yes." "Then run." The next 6 hours were the longest of his life. They had planned their attack well. They had disabled communications, locked down the escape pods, and scattered their assassins throughout the station. Every path to safety was blocked. Every route led to another ambush. And fought through all of it. He was shot in the shoulder during the first hour. The round went clean through, missing bone but tearing muscle. He wrapped it with strips from his shirt and kept moving. He was shot in the leg during the 3rd hour. That one stayed inside, and every step felt like someone was driving a hot nail into his thigh. He leaned on the wall and kept moving. During the 4th hour, an assassin caught him from behind with a blade. The knife slid between his ribs, and he felt something inside him tear. He turned and broke the assassin's neck with his bare hands, then pulled the knife out and used it to kill the next one. Watched all of this with growing horror. She had been raised to believe that humans were fragile creatures, weak and short-lived, barely worth consideration. She had been taught that they broke easily and gave up quickly, that their spirits were as limited as theirs. She watched Cole bleed and stumble and refused to fall. "Why are you doing this?" she demanded during a brief rest. They were hiding in a storage room, surrounded by crates of supplies, while tried to stop the bleeding from his side. "Your contract does not require this. You have already done more than anyone could ask." Looked up at her. His face was pale and covered in sweat. Blood soaked his uniform. He should have been dead hours ago. "You are scared," he said, "and you are alone. That is reason enough." "That is not reason. That is madness." "Maybe." He got to his feet, swaying slightly. "But where I come from, we do not leave people behind, especially not people who are scared and alone." Did not know what to say. In all her years of life, in all her studies of the galaxy species, she had never encountered anything like this. A being who would destroy himself for a stranger, a creature who treated death as an inconvenience rather than an end. "You are dying," she said quietly. "Probably," checked his rifle, 12 rounds left, "but not yet and not before you are safe." They moved again, through corridors filled with smoke, through sections where the gravity had failed and they had to pull themselves along the walls, through a cargo bay where 3 more assassins waited and killed them all while taking 2 more wounds that should have stopped him. Began to understand something about humans that night. They were not strong. They were not fast. They could not heal like other species or bend reality with their thoughts. Their bodies were fragile and their lives were short. But something burned inside them that did not know how to stop. Something that looked at impossible odds and said, "Not yet." Something that took all the pain and fear and turned it into fuel for one more step, one more fight, one more breath. By the time they reached the shuttle bay, could barely stand. His rifle was empty. 2 of his fingers were broken. He had lost so much blood that his lips were turning blue. But he was still moving. And for the first time in her ancient life, Princess understood why humans had survived so long in a galaxy that should have destroyed them. They simply did not know how to give up. The emergency shuttle bay was 50 meters long and 30 meters wide. It contained 6 escape shuttles, each capable of carrying 20 passengers to safety. The nearest shuttle was 20 meters from the door where and stood. Between them and the shuttle stood. The commander was unlike the assassins they had faced before. Where the others had been shadows, quick and silent, was a mountain of muscle and hate. He stood nearly as tall as a wrapped in armor that had been forged in the dying light of his. In his hands, he carried a blade that hummed with energy, long enough to cut a human in half with a single swing. 17 beings had died by that blade tonight, had counted each one. "Princess," he said, and his voice was like gravel scraping across metal, "I have been waiting for you." Put himself between and the commander. It was a pointless gesture. He could barely stand. His rifle was empty. His body was held together by nothing but stubbornness and whatever strength remained in his failing muscles. But he stood there anyway. Studied him with something that might have been curiosity. "You are the human who has been causing so much trouble. I have heard the reports. My soldiers did not believe one primitive could do so much damage." "Your soldiers are dead," said. "You should pay more attention to what primitives can do." The commander laughed. It was an ugly sound. "You are brave, human, but look at yourself. You are bleeding from a dozen wounds. Your weapon is empty. You can barely stand." He gestured with his blade. "Step aside. Your death does not have to be painful." Did not move. Behind him gripped his arm. "Please, the shuttle is right there. We can both make it if we run." He looked at her. His brown eyes were clouded with pain, but something else shone through. Something warm and sad and completely at peace. "No," he said gently. "We cannot. He is too fast. He will catch us before we reach the door." He turned back to face. "But if I keep him busy, you can make it. I will not leave you here to die." "Yes, you will," pulled his arm free from her grip. "You will get on that shuttle, you will go home, and you will become the leader I know you can be." "You do not know me." Her voice cracked. "We have known each other for days. You do not know anything about me." Smiled. Even now, with death standing in front of him, he smiled. "I know you came to the human quarter because you wanted to understand us. I know you watched children play and saw something that surprised you. I know you asked questions that no one in your position has ever bothered to ask." He reached out and touched her shoulder, leaving a bloody handprint on her glowing skin. "That is more than most of your people ever tried. That is enough." Was growing impatient. "Enough of this. Human, move aside or I will go through you." Turned to face him fully. He raised his fists. His hands were shaking and covered in blood. His body swayed like a tree in a storm. But his eyes were steady. "Go," he said without looking at her. "Now." "Please," his voice broke on the word. "Let me do this. Let me mean something." Felt tears she did not know she could cry sliding down her luminescent cheeks. She wanted to argue. She wanted to stay. She wanted to tell him that he already meant something, that he had changed everything she thought she knew about the galaxy. But she understood in that moment what he was giving her, not just her life, not just her escape. He was giving her a choice, the choice to live, the choice to honor his sacrifice by becoming something worthy of it. She ran, moved to intercept her, but was faster. He threw himself at the commander with nothing but his broken body and his unbreakable will. The blade caught him across the chest. He felt his ribs shatter. He felt blood fill his lungs. But he grabbed his arm and held on, slowing the creature down, buying precious seconds. Roared and threw him aside like a doll. Hit the floor hard, and for a moment everything went white. But he forced himself to move, forced himself to grab the commander's leg, forced himself to be an obstacle. "You are nothing," snarled, kicking him in the face. "You are an insect. Why will you not die?" Spat blood and smiled, "Because she is not safe yet." He got to his feet. He did not know how. His body was beyond broken, beyond repair, beyond anything that should still be able to move. But something inside him refused to stop. Swung his blade, ducked under it and drove his fist into the commander's throat. The blow was weak, pathetic by any standard, but it landed, and while staggered back, heard the most beautiful sound in the universe. The shuttle door sealing behind. Heard it too. He screamed in rage and turned toward the shuttle, ready to tear through the hull with his bare hands. Tackled him from behind. They went down together, rolling across the deck. Had no strength left, no technique, no weapons. He had only the absolute certainty that he could not let this creature reach that shuttle. He fought with his teeth, with his broken fingers, with the last drops of blood in his failing heart. And somehow, impossibly, he won. When finally stopped moving, was lying on top of him, both hands wrapped around the commander's throat. He did not know when the light had faded from his eyes. He did not know how long he had been squeezing. He only knew that it was over. Through the viewport of the shuttle, watched raise his head and look at her. Their eyes met through the reinforced glass. He was smiling. He mouthed two words that she would carry with her for the rest of her life. Worth it. Then he collapsed, and the shuttle's autopilot carried her away into the stars. Screamed. She screamed in frequencies that no human could hear, sounds of grief and rage and something else. Something that might have been love, though she would not understand that until much later. She pressed her hands against the viewport and watched the station grow smaller and smaller, until it was just another point of light among millions. Somewhere in that light, a human named Cole had given everything for a princess who had done nothing to earn it, and swore in that moment that she would spend the rest of her life being worthy of his sacrifice. 50 years passed like water through open fingers. Princess became queen on a morning when the twin sons of her painted the sky in colors that humans had no words for. She stood before a crowd of millions, wearing robes that had been passed down for 10,000 generations, and accepted the crown of the empire. The ceremony was ancient and beautiful and completely empty to her. All she could think about was a man with brown eyes and a crooked smile, who had taught her what courage really meant. In the years that followed, Queen changed everything. She began with small things. Human diplomats were no longer required to wait in separate quarters. Human traders were given fair prices in markets. Human children were allowed to apply for education in academies, something that had never been permitted before. Her advisors questioned her. Her nobles complained. The old families whispered that she had been corrupted by her ordeal on 4, that the human who had saved her had infected her with his primitive ideas. Ignored them all. She knew something that they did not. She knew that the galaxy had judged humanity too quickly. She knew that behind their short lives and fragile bodies, humans carried a fire that could not be measured by technology or time. When her mother, the High Matriarch, passed into the eternal light, ascended to the highest throne in the empire, she was now the leader of a civilization that had existed for 1,000,000 years. Billions of beings looked to her for guidance. Thousands of star systems followed her commands. And the first thing she did was visit the sacred memorial wall of the bloodline. This wall held the names of every ancestor who had contributed to the glory of the family. Some had been warriors who had conquered worlds. Some had been scholars who had unlocked the secrets of the universe. Some had been artists whose works had moved entire civilizations to tears. All of them had lived for thousands of years. All of them had been called for a chisel and began to carve. The master of ceremonies rushed forward, horrified. High Matriarch, this is sacred ground. Only those of blood may be honored here. Then the tradition changes today, said without stopping her work. When she finished, a new name stood among the ancient ones. It looked strange there, written in the blocky letters that humans used, surrounded by the flowing script of ancestors. Marcus Cole, guardian, teacher, unbroken. The master of ceremonies stared at it with his mouth open. High Matriarch, who was this being? Touched the letters she had carved. They were still warm from the friction of the chisel. He was a human, she said softly. He was a security guard who earned less in a year than you spend on your midday meals. He had no special powers, no advanced training, no reason to fight for me. She turned to look at the master of ceremonies with eyes that burned with old grief and older love. He died protecting a stranger because he believed it was the right thing to do. Tell me, In all your studies of our glorious ancestors, how many of them can claim the same? The master of ceremonies had no answer. Word spread quickly through the empire. The high matriarch had carved a human name into the most sacred wall in civilization. Some were outraged, some were curious. A few, the ones who had served alongside humans, understood. But was not finished. She signed the first mutual defense treaty between the Empire and Earth. She funded scholarships that brought human students to universities. She opened channels of communication between the two species that had been closed for centuries. And once a year, on the anniversary of the attack on 4, she dismissed all her attendants and sat alone in her private garden. There, hidden from the eyes of an empire, the most powerful being in 1,000 star systems would take out an ancient device. It was a simple music player that she had found in Cole's quarters after his death. It held only one song, something he had mentioned was his mother's favorite. Did not understand the words. Human music was strange to her, built on rhythms and tones that did not match harmonics. But she listened anyway every year, alone in the garden where no one could see her weep. Her closest advisors knew something had changed in their matriarch, though they never learned the full truth. They only knew that she ended every formal prayer with words that no had ever spoken before. We remember those who stood when they could have fled. We honor those who gave everything for those who gave them nothing. We keep their names sacred so that they are never truly gone. The first time she said these words in public, the audience did not know how to respond. The faith had existed for 1,000,000 years, and no one had ever added to its rituals. But the words were beautiful and they were true, and slowly, over decades, they became part of the fabric of belief. Generations of young grew up hearing those words. They did not know where they came from or who they were meant to honor. They only knew that their high matriarch spoke them with a weight that suggested something profound. And on Earth, humans noticed that things were changing. Ships no longer treated human vessels as obstacles. Merchants no longer cheated human traders. Diplomats spoke of humanity with a respect that had never existed before. No one could explain why. No official record revealed the truth. The attack on 4 was mentioned only as a footnote in history, a minor incident in which the princess had survived thanks to her own clever thinking. But in the highest halls of the empire, those who paid attention could find the answer. It was written on a wall, in letters that any human child could read. A name that the most powerful being in the galaxy had carved with her own hands. A reminder that sometimes, the smallest and shortest-lived among us can change the stars. 112 years after the night on 4, the High Matriarch felt her light beginning to fade. It was not unexpected. Even could not live forever, though they came closer than most. She had ruled for 6 decades, longer than any High Matriarch before her. She had transformed the empire from the inside out, building bridges between species that had been enemies for. But now her glow was dim, and her movements were slow, and she knew that her time was ending. There was one thing she had to do before she departed this existence. She summoned the human ambassador. Cole was young by any standard, barely 30 years old, with dark hair and brown eyes and a crooked smile that made ancient heart ache with memory. She had been assigned to the diplomatic post 2 years ago, chosen from hundreds of qualified candidates. She did not know why. High Matriarch bowed with perfect form. She had practiced for weeks before her first audience, terrified of making a mistake. "You honor me with this invitation." Studied her from her throne. The throne was enormous, built for beings twice the size of humans, and it made look smaller than she truly was. Or perhaps she simply was smaller now. Age did that, even to the ancient ones. "Do you know why you were chosen for this post?" asked. Hesitated. "I assumed it was my qualifications, High Matriarch. My doctoral thesis on cross-species communication was well received." Your qualifications are adequate." Luminescence flickered with something like amusement, though her light was too dim for to read clearly. "But I requested you specifically because of your name. I wanted to meet you before I departed this existence." Blinked in confusion. "My name, High Matriarch." "Cole, it is not a common name among your people, but it is not rare either. I had my servants search the genealogical records. It took them some time, but they confirmed what I suspected." Leaned forward slightly. "You are the great-great-grandniece of a man named Cole, a security contractor who died on a space station called 4 over a century ago." The color drained from his face. She knew the story, of course. Every member of her family knew the story. Her great-great-uncle who had died in some kind of accident while working off-world. The family had received a small settlement from the company and a letter expressing condolences. That was all. A life reduced to paperwork and polite regrets. Yes, High Matriarch. Cole was my ancestor, but I do not understand what this has to do with." "Sit down, child." Gestured to a chair that had been placed beside the throne. It was sized for humans, which was unusual. "I am going to tell you a story that I have never told anyone, and when I am finished, you will understand everything." Sat, her hands were trembling, though she did not know why. Closed her eyes and began to speak. She told about a bored princess who had watched humans play from an observation gallery. She told her about a security guard who did not bow and did not look away. She told her about a night of blood and fire and terror, about 6 hours that had felt like 6 lifetimes. She told her about a man who had been shot and stabbed and broken in a dozen ways, who had refused to stop moving, who had looked at impossible odds and said not yet. She told her about a final door and a final choice, and a sacrifice that had changed the course of galactic history. By the time she finished, was weeping openly, and its dim glow was poolsing with old grief. "He told me something," said, her voice barely a whisper. "In those final moments before the shuttle sealed, I have never shared it with anyone." Wiped her eyes. "What did he say?" "He said, tell your people we are worth knowing. Tell them humans are more than what we seem." Reached out and took his hand in her own. The touch was warm, warmer than expected. "I have spent my entire reign proving him right." Looked down at their joined hands. Human and mortal and ancient. 2 species that had been strangers until one man decided that a frightened princess was worth dying for. "He never knew," said softly. "He never knew what he started." "No, he never knew that a princess would become a queen who would become a high matriarch who would change the relationship between 2 civilizations." Squeezed her hand. "He never knew that his name would be carved on the most sacred wall in my culture, or that billions of beings would speak words that I wrote to honor him." "Then why did he do it?" Smiled. It was a tired smile, ancient and full of loss but beautiful all the same. "Because I was scared, and because I was alone. He told me that was reason enough." 3 days later, the High Matriarch passed into the eternal light. The Empire mourned as it had never mourned before. For 3 days, every light in the Empire was dimmed in her honor. For 3 days, no music was played, no celebrations were held, no laughter was permitted. But at the funeral, something unprecedented happened. A group of human soldiers in dress uniforms stood honor guard at the ceremonial hall. They were the first non-ever permitted at such a sacred rite. They stood perfectly still, their faces solemn, their eyes fixed straight ahead. The nobles did not know what to make of it. Some were offended, some were confused, but none of them dared to object because this had been the High Matriarch's final request. And at the end of the ceremony, when the final prayers were spoken, the words that had written a century ago echoed through the hall one last time. "We remember those who stood when they could have fled. We honor those who gave everything for those who gave them nothing. We keep their names sacred so that they are never truly gone." On Earth, in a small town in what was once called Montana, the Cole family received a package from the diplomatic corps. Inside was a medal of honor from an alien empire, cast in metals that did not exist on Earth. And beside it was a handwritten note, written in shaky but determined English by a hand that had clearly not held a human pen in many years. He was my friend. I never told him, but I think he knew. Please know that your ancestor changed the stars. His grandmother opened the package. She was 92 years old, and she had spent her whole life wondering about her uncle, about what had really happened on that station so long ago. Now she knew. She placed the medal on the mantel above the fireplace, next to an old photograph of a young man in a security uniform. He was smiling in the picture, that crooked smile that ran in the family, his brown eyes full of mischief and warmth. Cole had died thinking he was nobody special, just a man who needed money, who had taken a job to help his family, who had done what he thought was right. He never knew that he would become a legend. But then again, legends rarely do. They just do what needs to be done, for people who need help, in moments when it matters most. And they trust that somehow, somewhere, it will mean something. In the end, it always does.